There is a belief that sits at the center of nearly every piece of financial advice, and it sounds so correct, so logical, that it rarely gets questioned. It's the idea that if you are disciplined enough, if you control your spending, stay consistent, avoid mistakes, and stick to the plan, then eventually you will become wealthy. Discipline is presented as the ultimate solution, the deciding factor, the difference between those who succeed and those who don't. And to a certain extent, discipline does matter. It creates structure. It prevents chaos. It allows you to follow through on decisions that benefit you long-term, rather than reacting to what feels good in the moment. But the problem is not discipline itself. The problem is relying on discipline as the entire strategy. Because discipline on its own is not designed to create wealth. It is designed to maintain control. That distinction is where most people get stuck. They become incredibly disciplined within a system that is not optimized for growth. They manage their money carefully. They avoid unnecessary spending. They stay consistent with saving. And over time, they feel like they are doing everything right. But despite that effort, despite that consistency, the results don't scale in a meaningful way. Progress happens, but it is slow, incremental, limited. This is because discipline operates within boundaries. It helps you maximize what you already have, but it does not expand the system itself. It keeps things in order, but it does not introduce acceleration. And without acceleration, wealth remains out of reach, not because you are doing something wrong, but because the system you are operating within has limits that discipline alone cannot break. There is also a psychological trap that comes with being disciplined. It creates a sense of control, and that sense of control can feel like progress. You're making better decisions. You're avoiding mistakes. You're staying consistent. And because of that, it feels like you're moving forward. But control and growth are not the same thing. You can have complete control over a system that is fundamentally limited. This is where many people unknowingly cap their potential. They optimize within a structure that does not scale. They focus on cutting costs, managing expenses, and maintaining balance, but they never shift into a system that allows for multiplication. And because discipline reinforces consistency, they continue operating in that same system for years, sometimes decades, without realizing that the ceiling has already been reached. Another layer to this is that discipline often becomes associated with restriction. Saying no, avoiding risk, staying within safe boundaries. And while that approach reduces the chance of loss, it also reduces the chance of growth. Because growth, by its nature, requires some level of uncertainty. It requires stepping outside of what is predictable and entering a space where outcomes are not immediate or guaranteed. This creates a conflict. On one hand, discipline encourages control and predictability. On the other, wealth building requires exposure to systems that are not entirely predictable in the short term. And without understanding how to balance those two, people default to what feels safer. They stay within the boundaries of discipline and avoid the discomfort of expansion. There is also a structural limitation to discipline when it is applied to income and saving alone. You can only reduce expenses to a certain point. You can only save a portion of what you earn. These are linear improvements. They move step by step. But wealth, in its more advanced form, is not built linearly. It is built through systems that allow for exponential growth. Systems where progress begins to build on itself. This is where discipline needs to evolve. It cannot remain focused solely on control. It has to be redirected toward positioning, toward building systems that allow your money to grow beyond your direct input. Because without that shift, discipline becomes maintenance. It keeps you stable, but it does not move you forward at the pace required to create significant change. The individuals who break past this limitation do not abandon discipline. They repurpose it. Instead of using discipline only to restrict spending, they use it to ensure consistent allocation into growth systems. They use it to stay invested when it would be easier to pull back. They use it to maintain direction over long periods of time, even when results are not immediately visible. This shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Discipline is no longer about what you avoid. It becomes about what you sustain. Not just controlling behavior, but reinforcing the behaviors that lead to expansion. And over time, That reinforcement creates a new pattern, one where growth becomes the default outcome rather than something that requires constant effort. There is also an important realization that needs to happen at this stage, that being disciplined does not guarantee progress if the system itself is flawed. You can follow a plan perfectly and still end up in the same place if the plan is not designed to scale. And that realization is not easy because it challenges the idea that effort alone determines outcome. But once that shift happens, it creates clarity. It allows you to evaluate not just how well you are executing, but what you are executing on. It moves the focus from behavior alone to structure. And that is where real change begins. Because when discipline is applied to the right system, it becomes powerful. It ensures consistency. It maintains direction. It allows compounding to take place without interruption. And over time, that combination of structure and consistency produces results that are not possible through discipline alone. There is also a timing element that becomes critical. The earlier discipline is paired with a growth system, the more time that system has to compound. And time is one of the most valuable components in wealth building. Not because it guarantees results, but because it allows small actions to accumulate into something significant. Without that time component, discipline becomes a constant effort without acceleration. With it, discipline becomes a force that amplifies results over long periods. And that amplification is what eventually creates separation between effort and outcome, between input and result. There is also a deeper layer to this that often goes unnoticed. Discipline, when used correctly, reduces the need for constant decision-making. It creates systems that operate automatically. Contributions happen consistently. Investments continue regardless of short-term conditions. And because of that, progress becomes less dependent on how you feel in the moment. This is where discipline transitions from being a tool of control to a tool of momentum. It no longer just keeps things in place. It moves things forward. And that forward movement, sustained over time, is what builds wealth. But without that transition, discipline remains limited. It keeps you stable, but it does not create expansion. It prevents mistakes, but it does not guarantee progress. And that is the difference most people never fully understand. If you take anything from this, let it be this. Discipline is necessary, but it is not sufficient. It must be paired with a system that allows for growth, or it will only maintain where you already are. If this shifted your perspective, make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to Smart Money Compounds. Because here, we don't just focus on doing things right, we focus on doing the right things that actually move you forward.